and welcome to the harvest season. My name is Al.
My name is Raschelle.
And today we're going to talk about Pokemon. Farming games.
Woo.
So, the context to that is that we are recording roughly 5 hours after the Pokemon Direct announcing the new Pokemon games, and I'm really regretting this decision, but we're going to go ahead anyway, and we're going to talk about farming games. Woo!
I'm so tired and I'm so excited.
There is a section in our show notes for Raschelle to cry about the Pokemon, but that is not just now.
Okay.
You're going to cope just now.
Okay, I'll hold it until we get there.
So we're going to start off with some feedback. We got some more lovely feedback from people. We have a couple of emails that we're going to chat about because they've actually given us some questions to discuss.
People talk to us.
I mean, it still counts even though they're people that we knew before the podcast, right?
Shh.
Oh, okay.
Shh. I'm very excited.
So Dan has emailed in to say that he likes the podcast. Obviously, that's a great way to start. What games we would consider games that count as farming games or games that we would talk about on the podcast. Specifically, he's asking about Sid Meier's. How do you say? Is it Sid Meier? I don't think I've ever said his name. Sid Meier?
I have always heard it said Sid Meier.
Meier. Okay, I'm just going to do what people do.
So if it's not, I'm going to blame everyone I've ever known. So
it's fine. I've literally only ever seen it written down, and as we've discussed before, neither of us can say things in our head, so I've never pronounced it before. So, Sid Meier. Sid Meier's Railroads and things like Civ, Civilization, for those who don't know the cool lingo when we're down with the kids.
Do they count?
Yeah, so I guess it depends how you define games that we want to talk about. So the first thing is, no, they are not farming games. However, I guess this podcast isn't actually strictly about farming games. You know, we talked in the first episode about, you know, what farming games make us feel, how the play style of them, the fact that they're relaxed games, the fact that you're not there to race or button mash, or you're there to slowly just build up something, and in some cases that's a farm that you're growing crops on. Sometimes it's some of the other games that we've discussed, which I think would include things like Railroads and Civ, because, you know, they have the same sort of feeling when you play them. It's not about just rushing and getting to the end. It's about relaxation. It's about playing a game that's kind of, you don't need to think about too much. You're just doing some things and building up some things, and you create a nice efficient system.
I think I have a slightly different view on it that ends at a not that different place, where, like, technically, by the rules we laid out in our first episode, they do not count, because I think what we really kind of determined as our, like, hard rules were the games with the farming and the crops and the animals. And they don't really do that per se, but they definitely do have this sort of, like, spirit of just long-term, just doing the thing that I think really kind of, like, fits in. I don't know. I'm just kind of like, you know, I'm not opposed to covering them, but I don't think it's really what the podcast is about. Like, they are definitely a very distinctly different genre of games. They definitely have a lot more, I would say, like, emphasis on, like, overt strategy, if that makes sense. But I'll talk about them.
Yeah, I think I'm not saying that we're going to, you know, suddenly probably cover one of these games as one of the games in our Here's a Deep Dive into one of the games. I don't suspect that's something that we'll probably get to. I mean, if there's lots of demand for that, then maybe we will. But it's certainly, I don't think it's on our list of these are the games we want to talk about very much.
Mm-hmm.
But they definitely evoke the same sort of feelings, and I'm certainly not against us chatting about them, especially if it's like, oh, here's some news about something.
You have to understand, I have been known to be consumed by games before, so I really have to watch myself with, like, Civilization, because it's one of those games that I have had problems with before, like... Who needs to do anything for 36 consecutive hours except for play Civilization? So this is a dangerous proposal. So
do you need to go to a support group for that?
Oh gosh, honestly, probably could have used it if those had existed back when I was having that problem. They exist now, and now gaming disorder is an actual thing, but that did not exist then. So now I have better self-control.
Good. So thanks for the question, Dan. He also had another question, which we thought would be useful to mention as well. It's about multiplayer on Stardew on the Switch. So he's just asking whether he can use multiple accounts on the same Switch to play in the same Stardew multiplayer, and the answer is no. One of the games needs to host it, and it's always the same one that can host it. So you can't start up a game in one account and then close down that account, open up the other one, and go into the same game. The game is stored on one of the accounts, and that one always has to be. Correct me if I'm wrong, Raschelle, but I'm pretty sure that one always has to be in to play the game.
Yes. So the way it works is that if you make a farm on your account on your Switch, the entire thing is saved on your account on your Switch. And if you're not actively broadcasting that to a different Switch for another person to pick up on, no one can see it, no one can access it but you. So
yeah.
Even if you have two Switches, if you have Farm A on your Switch, you would have to host Farm A. So like if your wife had Farm B on her own Switch, it would be an entirely separate farm started from scratch with a different save and everything from Farm A.
Yeah, the farms aren't stored on a server somewhere. They're stored on your Switch, which you have to connect to.
Yeah.
Because obviously that would be a much bigger thing for, you'd have to have servers that are running and connect to them, and that's a much bigger expense to get these things running. So you'd probably end up having to pay for that as well. And, this way you can have multiplayer without that complication, but it does mean that you have to have one of them always running.
Yeah.
So, sorry, if you want to play Stardew with your wife, you have to get a second Switch.
Sorry, man. I feel the pain. Our other email comes from Johnny, who was asking about, so in his playthrough of Stardew Valley, he's done the whole community center and gotten married and made a bunch of friends and mostly automated his farm, except that he ignores his cow, and I'm mildly judging, but he knows that. And was kind of wondering, like, once you kind of hit those later stages of a farming game, like, how do you feel about it? What do you do? Which I have a lot of opinions on. Is there anything you feel specifically about that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, one of the things that I like to do at that point is, complete all the, what they called in Stardew, the achievements. Making sure that you've shipped one of everything, and making sure that you've shipped 200 of one thing, making sure you've shipped a certain value, all these achievements. Some of those can take quite a while, but obviously not everyone enjoys that type of thing. I guess this is where we get into the problem of, we could probably mention 10 things, but if none of those things appeal to Johnny, that's not necessarily going to help him.
Yeah, because my answer is, it's always complete everything. I am a completionist kind of a player. So like, I want to complete all the achievements. I want to get all the items. I want to ship one of everything. I want to collect all the things you can collect. Like in a lot of other games, like the game we'll be talking about today, you can collect outfits. You can collect decorations and stuff like that in a lot of games. So I tend to focus on doing that once I've got my farm kind of fine-tuned and running. Stardew Valley specifically, other than achievements and stuff, like if you're more creatively minded, it's fun to like really like dig in and design like a fancy farm. That can be really fun and can take a long time, like trying to get to like long-term goals, like the golden clock, which is a building you can build on your farm that's, you have to complete the community center, and it's like 100 bajillion trillion gold.
Oh, that's so expensive.
So like doing things like that. But I think for sure, like another suggestion I kind of have is like, make a new farm. Pick up another farming games. Like, I know it sounds kind of silly, but like, I've made probably 12 Stardew Valley farms. I usually have 2 or 3 save files on any given game that I'll play through. And honestly, it's fine. And you just learn to get better at it each time. And then that lets you focus on different things each time you go through. And that's fun as well. Like, I think part of why I like farming games so much is that they have a lot of replay value.
Yeah, and there's, you don't have to create a save file and just do the same thing again. You can do things like the challenges that we do. Mm-hmm. These sorts of things can be quite fun. What if I decide that I can only use one tool and I want to see what I can do with only using one tool? What if I decide I never want to talk to a villager? What if I want to, there's so many different things you can do that make it more interesting or just different. And some of them you'll get maybe 2 months in and be like, no, I'm done with this. But you tried it. And, there's lots of different ways to play the game.
Try different things. Pet your cows. Take care of your animals.
They haven't implemented an auto petter yet.
I love cows. Have you ever pet a real cow?
Yes.
So have I. They're very...
I used to live on a hill next to a loch in a very remote part of Scotland, and there were sheep and cows all around. That was a good time. It was very remote. The nearest bus to that was a 20-minute drive away. The nearest train was a 40-minute drive away. And of course, I was 17 and didn't have a driving license, so I couldn't even drive. So I was very remote, which was great. But yeah, lots of cows. Cows are good.
Cows are good.
Highland cows, specifically.
Highland cows are real cute.
Big brown furry ones. They're great. They are, as someone described, the teenagers of the cow universe.
Perfect. I love it. My great-grandfather was a farmer and agricultural teacher back where my whole family came from, who was particularly well known. And I used to go down and visit and pet cows and eat every tomato out of his garden.
That is not what I thought you were going to say. Pet cows and eat them.
No, actually, we never ate any of the cows. So, thank you.
Oh, dear.
They're too cute.
This is just one of those things. Every episode there's going to be somewhere where you say something and I assume you were going to say something else. Last time it was the snake tacos. This time it's eating the cows.
Oh my gosh. They didn't even get to hear the snake tacos.
Oh, we cut that bit out, didn't we?
We're just gonna we're gonna leave it a memory. It's fine. They'll find it out eventually, I'm sure.
R.I.P. snake tacos.
So yeah, try doing different things. Pet your cows. Cows are good creatures. Cows are very good creatures. Thanks for your emails.
Woo.
Please, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please email us at...
There is a contact form on the website. Or you can tweet us at THSPod. We are always paying attention there. Or you can do what these people have done and review us on iTunes or Podchaser. Thank you to Dame6089.
And Delver of Secrets.
Thank you to Stuart Gibson.
And Pokémon Lover with no vowels, 517.
Vowels are a thing of the past.
I have a lot of thoughts about the removing of vowels in words, but this is not the Raschelle Philosophy podcast, so...
Although I would listen to that.
You say that now. Anyway.
Raschelle, what are you playing?
All right, are you ready for this?
Yes.
Because I have been playing a single game. Since we last talked.
Oh, exciting.
I have been playing a lot of Little Dragon's Cafe. And let me tell you, I finally figured this game out. I played a little bit and I had this point where I got stuck and I was like, what's going on? Why can't I progress further? I figured it out. It's got a pattern. I have found the pattern. I know how to do the pattern. Doing great. It's pretty fun, I think. It's kind of like this rinse and repeat because, like I said, it literally runs on a pattern over and over again where you go through a character's story and then they leave and then another character comes and you go through their story, etc., etc. But I'm enjoying it so far. I think the translation is a little wonky. There's times where I think I explained it to a friend of mine as if Google Translate was 2 or 3 notches smarter. So it's not horrible and it's easy to understand, but it's also not quite right, if that makes sense. It's just a little off of English syntax and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I was wondering, it looks like it was initially Japanese.
Yes.
So, yeah. I think sometimes, translations between Japanese and English can be just a little bit awkward if you're not amazing at it. And it's even in the, the best games, there are still little things that you're like, ooh, that's just weird.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many memes based around odd translations.
Yeah. So, that's a little off, but everything's easily understandable. And This game is really pretty. I love the aesthetics of it. I really like the characters. I think they're really fun and they've got like a lot of variety and stuff. I do have some minor complaints, like translation, and like there's a weird way in which your character moves through the world that I think has some little kind of like iffy parts to it. Like you can't turn very quickly. This comes up for me in two particular circumstances. First of all, jumping. There's a lot of like jumping over ledges or jumping on top of rocks and stuff like that. And when you jump, sometimes it can be hard to like if you have to do 2 jumps in a row, it can be hard to like get that second jump. You'll get caught on like the second ledge you're trying to get over. Like if you don't have a running start, it's kind of hard. Like you have to aim how far you're jumping so that you have room to go further to jump up the next jump. And then my other problem is more like, so in Pokemon, you know, your character, you can spin around in a circle, a very tight circle, like right where you're standing.
Yep.
To be able to turn, you have to make wide turns in this game. So like it can be hard to like very quickly reorient yourself, which like neither of those things make the game unplayable and neither of those things are really terrible. Like once you kind of figure it out, it's easy to get a hang of, but it's also noticeable enough of an issue for especially for someone who plays a lot of games that it's kind of like, I feel like they could refine this a little bit more, you know? But overall, I'm enjoying it. I am not nearly all the way through it though, so
there is an overarching story as well as the individual character stories.
Yes, and it's long.
In a good or a bad way?
I wouldn't necessarily say bad. It feels a lot... It actually feels... I have Pokemon on the brain. I'm sorry. It feels a lot like Pokemon, where like Pokemon has a story where you're going from town to town, but then in between there's kind of like... I don't want to say filler, but like non-story oriented gameplay that's about like going through routes and catching Pokemon and stuff. It has something very much like that. Like there's story, but in between there's like these smaller, repetitive, mundane tasks of collecting ingredients and running the cafe and stuff that extend the time of the play. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anyway, now that I've recorded an entire episode on how I feel about Little Dragon's Cafe.
Well, here's the question for you. So, Little Dragon's Cafe is not a cheap game, obviously. You know, and a lot of the games that we talk about on here are, you know, your $10 to $20 games. This one is obviously a lot more expensive. With that in mind, play or don't play?
Right now, I'm going to say play. It's maybe get it used. It's fun. I enjoy it a lot. I'll let you know how I feel if it changes by the end of the game. Because I'm like maybe a third of the way through it, I think. So,
okay.
Tentative play.
Tentative play.
What have you been playing?
That's a very good question. I probably should have thought about this before. I don't think I've played much last week because I've been quite busy with life. I have been playing some Tetris 99.
Oh gosh. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's the complete opposite of the type of game we talk about here. It is stressful. It is time-based. It is very... I hate it, but I love it. And whenever I talk about it and say how stressful it is, people tell me to turn off the music. But no, I need the music on because I need to get in and do it properly. My highest score so far is 17. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's not my usual sort of game. And the interesting thing is, I was never really into Tetris. I never really spent any time playing Tetris because I found it boring. And I don't like games that just feel endlessly meandering. There's no real end point to it. And I know most Tetris games have levels and stuff like that, but it just felt pointlessly odd. Like, it wasn't like, solve this puzzle and this level's done. It was like, you have to just keep doing these blocks until an arbitrary point where you've decided that, oh, that's enough blocks. You know, that it just felt odd. Whereas this, it's very definitely like, you know, you're going in, this game is going to be over in 2 minutes. Like, you know, you don't have a lot of time to put into it. You just need to get there, get out, get done. You don't have any time to think about things. It's just, you just need to get that block down. You need to get rid of those blocks. You make a mistake, you might be dead, but you can just start a new game immediately. And I really like that. And the stress of it, although stressful, obviously, is actually what is making me enjoy Tetris for the first time.
This is fascinating.
Because I bet everything that I've just said is the complete opposite for you.
Yes. I grew up playing Tetris. I love Tetris. I'm kind of fascinated that you're not really into it because I feel like, for me, the appeal of Tetris is just the complete zoning out and like turning my brain to mush, just thinking about nothing but how these shapes fit together. You know what I mean? Like, I hate Tetris 99. And the thing is that, like, it's not because I hate Tetris, because I love Tetris. It's not necessarily because I'm bad at it. Like, I'm pretty good at it, I think. I usually averaged at the least in the top 50. I think the highest I ever got was to 6.
That's pretty good.
I just don't, it's not my thing. I think part of it is that I get stressed out. I just want to play Tetris.
Yeah.
And you don't get more than a couple minutes at a time of this. There's no like I will play a single Tetris game for like 30, 45 minutes, an hour.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. I think it's not Tetris.
Yes, it's not.
It's stress Tetris.
It's so
Stress-tris.
Yeah, and I think what kind of like...
Stress-tris. Stress-tris. Or Tetris-stress.
Test-stress.
It's stress Tetris.
Yes.
It's not the same thing. And if you enjoy Tetris and you go in expecting to play Tetris, you're not gonna be happy.
You're not gonna get Tetris.
No.
And I think my biggest issues are, one nitpicky thing that's not a big issue is that, so it has the box of everyone else you're playing against, and then it'll draw a yellow line from their box to a box right under your grid that says look out if they're attacking you. And if you get enough people attacking you, you actually can't see your grid and you can't see where you're putting blocks. And I think that's a design flaw.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then, like, I think my issues are really, I guess, threefold. First, that I just want to play Tetris, which I know has more to do with me than the game. Second of all, is that, like, Tetris feels like a very skill-based game to me because it's a lot about learning what blocks could go where and how quickly you can put them there and whether to build up a wall that you can quickly clear 2 or 3 or 4 rows at a time, or whether you need to clear 1 row at a time to get things out. And it seems so contrary to me to have such a skill-based game where you can literally lose, not because of your skill, but because 10 people decided to attack you at once, and all of a sudden between 2 blocks you can get 20 lines of junk blocks and you automatically lose without you doing anything. And I think that's what really gets to me the most about it.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. And I have had games where that happens. You're just like, oh well. But then you just start a new one. And I find that doesn't happen enough to annoy me. And again, because they're such quick games and you can restart immediately, I don't find that annoying because it's like, oh well, on to the next one. You know, and it's about just improving slightly on the last one. And if I get chucked out really quickly, it's frustrating, but it's not the end of the world.
Yes, and I think those 2 things I can probably deal with if it weren't for the third issue I have, which is that it is a lot of waiting.
Yeah.
I have a thing with games. I do not like to sit in loading screens. I understand if there's a loading screen, I understand when it needs to load, but I have a limit of how much I will tolerate. And for every 2 games of Tetris 99, for every 2 game round, you are guaranteed to have a minimum of at least a minute of waiting time, waiting for people to connect. And then you have to wait 10 seconds, and then you have to get ready for 5 seconds, and then you can start, usually waiting for people to connect. I've never had it take less than 30 seconds.
Yeah, but I guess that's kind of always going to be an issue with when you have 100 people playing a game. There's going to be that wait time, and I think that's probably
and I think that's
unavoidable.
It's just inherent to the genre, but that's also part of why I don't play battle royale games a lot.
Yeah.
So
I totally get that. I'm not going to try and convince you to play Tetris 99. I think we agree that it's not Tetris.
It's not.
It's a game based on Tetris.
Yes.
And if you'd never liked Tetris before, like me, you might enjoy this. But if you want to play Tetris, don't play Tetris.
Download Tetris on your phone like I did. Yeah. I literally got to the point where I was like, I just want to play Tetris. And I got you playing
Tetris.
I'm not going to lie. I played a lot of Tetris these past couple weeks because I was just like, I needed my fix. I'm like dreaming about blocks in my sleep. Ugh.
Well, so that's most of my game playing. I've had a wee bit of Pokémon, and I have been playing. Well, last night I started playing Factory Town, which we'll come back to later. As to why I was playing Factory Town, and I think that's really it. It's been quite a quiet 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, quiet in terms of games, busy in terms of everything else.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
I did a wee bit more Stardew. I wanted to get to the end of fall in the challenge to see if I could get anywhere close to your number, but then I got bored.
That's fair.
So I stopped that. Yeah.
You need something to stir up that pot sometimes, like news.
News.
Oh, did you see that A+ transition?
That was amazing. You know, it's funny, Raschelle, because when we were talking about this podcast, I'm pretty sure both of us were convinced that there would be very little news episode to episode.
There's so much news. Oh my gosh, there's so much news. Every week. I'm shocked.
And that's the thing, like every time, like after we've finished recording, the next morning, there's like 2 or 3 things almost immediately, right? Can we please release the news about farming games on Mondays? That would be great. Please and thank you.
Someday. We just have to become so influential that the entire industry revolves around our recording schedule.
That would be great. Okay, so first of all, last episode we were talking about esports with Farming Simulator. Well, the farming game esports market is exploding now. We now have Stardew Valley esports.
Whoop whoop!
So I think this is over now. I think it was Monday,
February 26th.
Yeah, it was on Twitch. There were a bunch of... It was quite interesting. I didn't watch for very long, but I did load it up to see what the challenges were. There were things like, getting to the bottom of the mine quickest. There was certain, farming challenges. There were a lot of kind of standard, what you would expect in a... It was basically speedrun challenges, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, first of all, I'm so proud of this game and this genre. And I think it's really fun and important to be because as much as no one really wants it to be, having some sort of esports for a game gives it a kind of legitimacy for the broader gaming community. And for a very long time, I think I've talked about this before with my personal history, a lot of people don't really take farming games seriously. Those are kind of those are silly, lame, girly games. No one really wants to play those. Those aren't real games, and just being able to have someone step up and say actually, those are real enough games that Twitch is going to sponsor a competition. That's really nice and kind of validating, both as a gamer. I'm sure it's nice and validating for Concerned Ape and people who play Stardew Valley and stuff like that. And it's warms my heart.
Yeah, I mean, just 3 years ago, he released Stardew Valley 3 years ago yesterday, and now yesterday, the people were competing for money to play his game.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so cool. Maybe they'll do it next year and I will be able to participate.
Let's hope so.
I guess I'm just going to have to become a Twitch streamer.
That's just how these things are going. Speaking of Stardew Valley, the Android release date has been announced. So I think last time we talked about the fact that the Android release had been announced, that it was going to happen. We obviously knew it was going to happen at some point, but now we know it's definitely happening. Yesterday, Concerned Ape announced that the release is happening on the 14th of March.
That's in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, yeah.
Whoop, whoop.
So get yourself another version of Stardew, or don't. It's up to you.
Only going to be $8.
It's a steal.
Played on your phone in many languages, just in case you need that addiction to go with you wherever you go and haunt you and distract you from doing your work.
You can never escape.
Could never escape.
And the other thing that is Stardew news that came out since the last episode was recorded, he also announced a number of quality of life updates for the iOS and Android versions. So the primary issue that people have with these mobile versions is obviously you have to save only at the end of a day, which when you're on mobile can be quite difficult, spending 15 minutes on a day. Well, worry no longer. You can now save at any time.
Whoop whoop.
So that's great.
Fantastic. That was my major concern about it. So
yeah, so that is a really good news. Also, there's pinch to zoom functionality, so you can zoom in and out of the map using your fingers. I don't know whether you just couldn't zoom before or whether you had to do it in a difficult way.
I mean, to be fair, I didn't know you could zoom in regular Stardew Valley until about a week ago.
Oh, Raschelle, are you telling me I knew something about Stardew before you did?
I mean, you also knew about Clint selling coal, so...
Oh, yeah.
never gonna live that down. I'm never
that
gonna
was
let
perfect.
myself live that down. That's so yes. The answer is yes.
There's also new controls. I don't think either of us have actually played the mobile version, so I'm not sure how it actually currently works. But there's a virtual joystick, and you can turn the joystick invisible, and there's a bunch of other changes to it. I'm not going to read all them out. If you play it on iOS just now, go take a look at the updates. There might be something good for you.
Mm-hmm. I will have to decide if I'm going to put this on my phone. If that's too dangerous for me at work. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll
I
see.
keep telling myself I don't need to buy it. I don't need to buy it. I've got it on my Switch. I don't need it on my phone.
But it's only $8.
I know.
See, like,
I don't need it.
This is the struggle.
Look, be careful. If my wife realizes you're trying to convince me to buy a game, she might not let me record the podcast anymore.
I am a very dangerous person to be around. I don't know. Will I buy the game? Will I own it on a third system? No one knows. We'll just tune in 2 weeks and then we'll let you know.
Speaking of games we don't know whether we'll ever own.
Oh my gosh. So, people thought we missed this. And appreciation. People are looking out for us. They're like, hey, guys, did you get this? We did. So, back when the last Nintendo Direct came out, we talked about games. One game we did not talk about was Doraemon Nobita no Bokujo Monogatari. In case you were wondering why we didn't talk about that from the Nintendo Direct, it's because it was only on the Japanese Nintendo Direct, which I did watch. This is a Story of Seasons title. It is a crossover game, so it's not like a straight Story of Seasons. It's crossed over with another franchise, which, correct me if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, but I'm pretty sure it's like a very, very, very popular like children's manga essentially in Japan from my cursory research. So it's got like characters from this manga and stuff like that. It would not be the first crossover Story of Seasons game. There is already one out that we did end up getting in the US. We did get in 2016 in the US. We got Return to Popolo Croix. Return to Popolo Croix, A Story of Seasons Fairy Tale, which is a crossover with the Popolo Croix. I don't know what it is, but it's a crossover with that.
What you're saying is they've done crossovers before.
Yes, they've done crossovers before, and this is another crossover game. We'll see if we make it. It makes it to the US. A lot of the stuff I was reading online was saying that Doraemon is a lot more popular in Japan than it is in the US, but that doesn't necessarily mean we won't get it. So we'll keep you updated, let you know if we get it in anywhere but Japan. For those of you in Japan, you're all set. Buy it, play it, tell me how it is.
Or those who can speak Japanese and want to sign into their Switch on the Japanese region, you can do that.
You want some salt to rub in my wound? Like,
just learn Japanese, Rochelle.
You're right. I just gotta learn
It's
Japanese,
easy.
and then I can stop, and then I can play this game and stop embarrassing myself, not knowing how to say things.
I from what my expectation is, it probably won't come out.
I mean, the last one did. So.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, you can go buy that at the store for like $20.
Did you play it?
No.
Okay. Cool chat.
Good game. You know what else is probably going to be a good game?
Oh, nice one.
Rune Factory 5. I'm very, 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 very into Rune Factory. I'm very excited about this.
I think you've mentioned that before, yeah.
This is not exciting. Just so you know, there's like teaser website that's finally up, but it's not really anything.
It's very teasy.
It's so teasy. It's not really anything super exciting, to be honest. It's a very fancy single-page website with a fancy animated background and a fancy text that says Rune Factory 5 2020.
And it's in Japanese.
It is in Japanese.
Well, I mean, there's not very much that's in Japanese, but it is a Japanese website. So
yes.
All we can say is that it's probably coming in 2020 in Japan, and it might be coming elsewhere in that year. We don't know, because we've not heard anything else. So it's possible it might release in Japan first and then elsewhere later, but it's nice to have some sort of a timeline.
Yes, it's nice to know other than we're working on it. So that gives a timeline. We'll see, because I feel like historically we usually would get games a year or 2 or 3 later. But I think just as technology develops and the world becomes more globalized, people are leaning a lot more towards like closer releases, and just like part of developing games has become translating it for other regions. So we might get it in 2020.
Yeah, and that's always been the big thing. So if we've talked a lot about comparing things to Pokemon today, but
it's on the brain.
The way that Pokemon worked was they made the game, they released it in Japan, and then they got people to translate it and then released in the other regions. Because obviously, the big disadvantage of trying to translate it everywhere is, well, one, you need to finish exactly what there is to translate in enough time that they can translate it before the game releases. And two, it increases your chances of leaks, right? Because if you have more people looking at the game, you have more chances that people will say something. So there are disadvantages for them to do that. But obviously the advantage is that everybody gets it at the same time. It's good press. They get all the press all at once, these sorts of things. And obviously we prefer it because we get the games quicker.
Which, I don't know. I feel like the general video game industry is leaning towards that nowadays.
Yeah.
Like that's just becoming more and more expected from people. So they do it more and more despite the risks. So
yeah, it's harder to justify releasing at different times.
Yes, it's becoming one of those things where like when games are not released universally, people criticize it.
Well, even just look at, for example, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the Pokemon games was released in Europe a week after everywhere else. A week, 7 days.
And people were so, understandably, so mad.
Yeah, and I was one of those people. I was really annoyed about that, right? Because we'd had like 2 games before that came out at the same time. They knew what to do. It was so close. It didn't make any sense that it was a week later. It's not like it was 6 months and they needed to translate stuff. It was a week was such an odd thing. And so it was really frustrating.
We're in a transitionary period. We'll get there eventually.
Next, we have you looked at this game, Raschelle? This game, I adore the look of this game. So it's called Airborne Kingdom. And the idea is, it's not really a farming game. It's more city management. But as we discussed, it kind of fits the same sort of play style of things. You're building a city, but it's a floating city. And so you have to consider things like not unbalancing it and things like that. And the art style just looks so nice.
It's so nice. It's so pretty. I'm a sucker for a really good art style in a game.
Yeah.
And I just, this is great.
I love it. It's great.
It looks super interesting.
It does. It's coming on Steam soon. We don't have a date for it. And I think it's Steam only, which is sad, but I'm sure I'll buy it at some point. Another thing that's also coming soon on Steam is Good Company. This is such a weird game, and I have no idea whether it counts as anything, but basically you're running a startup company. You have to design something to sell. You try and sell it. You have to ship it. It just looks hilarious.
It just looks kind of like, it looks like it'll really scratch that same itch as like The Sims or Spore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but the graphics as well are just so goofy.
They look so
Everything
cute
is
and
so
silly.
over enthusiastic and like the movement. Oh, just
I love it.
so weird. I love weird games.
Me too.
And the final thing in our is a game that I'll probably never play because it's only on iPhone at this point, but it's called Noah Noah. And this is described as a virtual pet collector. It's basically Tamagotchi type.
Tamagotchi.
On your phone. Looks great. I'm really annoyed that this is iOS only.
I want it, and I curse you, Apple people.
Maybe if we complain enough, they'll bring it to Android. Who knows? But yeah, you seem to have lots of different styles that you can use, and yeah, it looks really nice. It's out now.
Someone please play this and tell me how it is.
We need that Micah to play it because obviously he's the Tamagotchi maestro.
Micah, do it. Shout out to Micah, who did the art for our podcast.
Micah's great.
At Micah the Brave.
I sometimes feel like everything I say sounds sarcastic. That was not meant to be sarcastic.
No, Micah's fantastic, and he's a wonderful person.
He is.
He is. All right, you want to hit this last one real quick?
Yeah, okay, so we mentioned Factory Town before. We mentioned in the last episode as a game coming out soon. It comes out in 2 weeks, or 1 week when you hear this. It is a cross between SimCity, The Sims, and Stardew Valley. Reason we're mentioning it again is because the developers gave us some review copies, which is fantastic. Thank you very much for that. We will be playing that over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to review it.
And we're going to let you know.
Yeah, we're not just going to play it ourselves and then not tell you, obviously.
We're so serious and fancy.
Yeah,
oh
look at us getting
gosh.
review copies of games already.
This is so magical.
So thank you for the review copies. You can go wishlist it on Steam just now and buy it on the 12th of March. We will have a link in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm excited to play this.
Me too. I've already played it a little bit, but I'm excited to play more of it.
We'll let you know. I'll save my thoughts. All right. What's next?
Raschelle Cries about Pokémon.
I love Pokémon.
We both very much like Pokémon.
Right now is recording.
As we are recording.
It's Pokemon Day 2019, and they announced Gen 8 with the trailer, and I love the starters so much. They're so cute and small and round, and I love them, and I want to protect them, and they are my children.
The Pokemon Company broke Rochelle, and we almost didn't get this. We almost didn't get a podcast recorded this evening because of it. I hope you're happy, Game Freak.
I love them so much. They're so cute. They're so good. They're small and they're round and they're good and they're my children and I love them. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That was a lot shorter than I expected. Good.
I was practicing shortening it. It's fine.
I guess we should get on to the main topic of our podcast, which will probably be not very long.
Yes. So there was a ton of news today, and it's Pokemon Day, and we are going to jump into reviewing Factory Town for you guys. So that's a lot going on. So we just wanted to do a really short, quick, almost like a preview of the next thing we're going to hit on our podcast, which is going to be the game Story of Seasons Trio of Towns. Whoop whoop.
Woo!
One of my favorites. Oh, it's so good.
Mine too.
Although to be fair, I'm pretty sure you've only played 2 games.
Come on, don't ruin it.
Look.
It can still be one of my favorites.
Okay, I accept that. Today, we're just going to give you a really brief overview of the game so that maybe if you haven't heard about it, you can get an idea, maybe do some research.
Maybe try it out.
And then in the next couple episodes, we're going to do a deeper dive. So, Trio of Towns, what is it? This game came out for the 3DS in 2016 for Japan, 2017 for everywhere else in the world.
Wow. So wait. Wait just a minute.
Yeah?
It only released in Europe in 2017. That was only not even 18 months ago.
Yeah. And this made me realize, looking up this information for our show notes that I know that I joke all the time that time isn't real, so it doesn't matter. But the last few years have been so long. I literally don't comprehend how time has passed. I think in one of our prior episodes, I had literally said, this came out years ago. I mean, it did came out years ago, technically.
Well, this is the thing, right? So it came out in Japan on the 23rd of June, 2016. Do you know what else happened that day?
Yeah.
No, I suspect the answer is no, actually.
What else happened, Al?
That was the UK's referendum on EU membership.
Yep.
We've not even
Yep. Things that hadn't happened then. Your EU membership, the United States presidential election.
But these things both feel like they've been forever ago, but also they really shouldn't. They don't. They also. Oh my goodness, you're right. Time is messed up.
Every day is like a month for the past few years, and so my sense of time has been greatly skewed. So, sorry that I said this game came out many years ago once, when I was wrong, because it only came out barely technically years with an S ago.
Yeah. Not even if you're talking about outside of Japan and America.
Yeah.
Wow.
Arguably by the time this comes out, it'll have been released for 2 years in the United States and technically North America. I'm sorry, that was very US centric because it came out in North America on February 28th, 2017. So barely 2 years. This feels like 100 years ago. But it came out for the 3DS.
That ancient system.
That ancient system that Al can't even play anymore because it's so old.
I got my Switch out of my drawer. Not Switch. I got my 3DS out of my drawer to play this game. Thank you very much.
I'm proud of you.
I played it. I spent a lot of time playing this game.
It's a good game.
Just for you. Just for you, Raschelle.
I appreciate it.
And I don't regret it.
It's a couple years old. It's a Story of Seasons game, which I guess since this is the first time we've encountered it, this might be a good time to explain the difference between Story of Seasons and Harvest Moon.
Buckle up, everyone.
Because this is something that gets a lot of people.
I think I understand it now.
Yeah?
I've heard you say it enough times that I think I get it.
So, I'm going to keep this as brief as possible. The Harvest Moon games are known in Japan as Bokujo Monogatari. That's their Japanese name. Sorry that I can't pronounce Japanese. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. Long story short, these games, shortened a lot of the times as like Bokumono, and that's how I'm going to say it because that's a lot easier. So the Bokumono games are made by a company called Marvelous in Japan. And up until very recently, they were localized for North America by the company Natsume. And it's Natsume who created the English title of Harvest Moon for these games. So what happened is a number of years back, Marvelous acquired a new company called Xseed Games and decided that rather than localizing games through Natsume, they're going to use their own company, which is Xseed. So the same games were being produced by the same company, but put out through a different company in other regions. But the catch is that Natsume, the company that was originally localizing these games, has the copyright to the Harvest Moon title. Not to the games, but to the title itself. So they couldn't put out the same games under the same title anymore because they didn't have the rights to that title. So they had to pick...
And that's just the title in English, not the Japanese one.
Yes, just the English title. In Japan, they continue to be the Bokumono games, same title and everything. But in other regions, they can no longer use Harvest Moon, so they had to pick a new name, which they picked Story of Seasons. But Raschelle, you may be wondering, I'm pretty sure I've seen Harvest Moon games came out since after Story of Seasons started. And you're right. And that's because Natsume decided to keep their title going and have hired different companies to make games under the Harvest Moon title. Now you're getting Harvest Moon games that are made specifically to be Harvest Moon games by a different company, and you're getting Bokumono games, which is what people traditionally think of as Harvest Moon, being put out under Story of Seasons. Did that make sense?
Well, it made sense to me because I already understand it by this point. So Harvest Moon is Harvest Moon, but Harvest Moon used to also be Harvest Moon. But now Story of Seasons is what Harvest Moon used to be, and New Harvest Moon is not what Story of Seasons used to be.
Yes. It's messy and complicated, and I cut out all the parts with all the different companies, acquiring all the different companies. Like, it's a hot mess.
For our listeners and my benefit, when was the split? What year was the split?
So the last Bokumono game put out under a Harvest Moon title was in 2012.
So anything called Harvest Moon after 2012 is not that company. Bokumono. The Bokujo Monogatari games. Here, let me do this a much easier way. The last Harvest Moon title that was a Bokumono title was Harvest Moon 3D, A New Beginning. And then it split. After that, the Bokumono titles became Story of Seasons and Story of Seasons Trio of Towns. And then the games that Natsume created, which are a different series under the same Harvest Moon game, have been... There have been about 100 of them, haven't there?
There's been a number, yes.
They're just churning them out.
Harvest Moon 3D, The Lost Valley, Harvest Moon Seeds of Memories, Harvest Moon Skytree Village, and Harvest Moon Light of Hope.
And that A Light of Hope is the Switch one.
Yes, Light of Hope is the most recent. The one on the Switch came out 2017. And the latest Story of Seasons, again, we just talked about 2016, 2017.
Excluding the crossovers that are other.
Yes.
We're just talking about the main ones, the Story of Seasons and Trio of Towns.
I want to make something very clear right now. Just because the new Harvest Moon games are not straight up Bokumono games does not mean they are worse, does not mean they are inherently awful, does not mean they aren't real games and shouldn't be played. If anyone says that to me, I'm not going to... No. Just no.
But the new one is bad.
The new one is bad. But
which doesn't help the situation when you're trying to say that it doesn't make them bad, but the new one is bad.
Yeah, but other of the ones they've made haven't necessarily been bad. So
of course.
They're just different games under a very confusing title issue.
Yeah.
So don't automatically write them off. If I hear any of our listeners trying to be dumb and gatekeeping over, oh, you're not playing real Harvest, I will have none of that. There is no gatekeeping allowed in our community. Done.
Agreed.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
We need an official stance this episode, and that's no gatekeeping.
I am aggressive in my hatred of gatekeeping. So this is the last straight Story of Seasons game to come out. It's called Trio of Towns. And just as a brief overview, this game actually, part of the reason I like this, I know people hate this because it makes the intro really long, but part of the reason I like it is that it has you have a backstory where you have a mom and a dad and a little sister, and your dad gets a new job somewhere else and the whole family has to move. And you kind of decide oh, wait a second, I don't really want to move away with you. What if I become a farmer? And then you fight with your dad because your dad is no, you cannot do that. And you're I can do this, Dad. And the compromise you come to is that your uncle is a farmer in a town called Westtown. And if you go to your uncle and your uncle will put you through some tests, and if you pass your uncle's tests, your dad will allow you to become a farmer. So you go, you live with your uncle. That's kind of how the tutorial happens, is passing your uncle's tests, and then you get your own farm.
There's something about the farm, though. Is it not someone's farm that you're taking over that they'd left abandoned or something?
So...
it's not just a new area that you decided to create a farm.
Okay, here's what I have to say about this. Because I know other people don't like spoilers, so I won't spoil the story of the game.
Oh, yeah.
We'll say this is a local farm to the region that had been left abandoned.
Oh, I just realized. Yeah, I realized what I did.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm here for you.
Oops. Yes, the things are just clicking in my brain, because I did know the spoiler that you mentioned, but I hadn't linked that spoiler to the farm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
There is a farm, there's an abandoned farm.
Yeah, and it's local to this region, and the whole story pitch of this game, the big sell of this game is, I don't know if you noticed from the title, there's a trio of towns.
3 of them.
So
3 towns.
in most farming games, you'll have just the one town. You have your local village, you have, for example, Stardew Valley, you have Pelican Town, and there's the one town you go to, there's people there. No, that's not good enough for Story of Seasons. They have to have 3 whole towns. And as you progress through the game, you unlock the 3 towns. There's the town your uncle comes from, which is Westtown, which is American Wild West themed. Is that appropriate?
I think that's appropriate, yeah.
In the summer of your first year, you unlock Lulucoco, which is, I'm going to say, roughly Polynesian themed.
Yeah. Obviously, it's not on an island, but it's the culture is clearly meant to be Polynesian.
And then you unlock the 3rd town, Tsuyakusa, which is historical Japanese themed. And
very, very traditional.
Yes, I believe it's based off on a particular era of Japanese history, which I can't remember off the top of my head. Just so you guys know, I'm literally doing this without notes. This is all from my brain. I play too many farming games. So all 3 of these towns are connected by a central meeting area that also connects to your farm. Each town has its own full cast of characters and its own story.
There are so many.
Holidays.
So many.
There are so many characters. Literally, we're going to have to set aside an episode just to talk about the characters because there's that many.
Yeah, we can't get into that just now, but there are a lot of characters. You will find someone you like. There are so many characters.
Yes. And so you're doing your thing, you're farming this farm, and part of the story progression is how your relationship is with the different towns. And I think that's a good elevator pitch. That's a very long elevator pitch.
It's a big elevator.
It's been a real long elevator ride. Just like, how many hundreds of floors are we going? Like,
yeah. I think that is a good description. Essentially, the main big difference from normal farming games is, you're right, the 3 towns and how they all have different cultures. They all like different things in different ways. But of course, you can only ship to one of them at one time. So you have your shipping box and you decide which town you're going to ship to the next day. And you have differing levels of relationships with the towns as a whole, as well as the characters within them, which is based on so many different things, and so you have to balance out what it is you're going to do, because obviously you don't have time to focus on all 3 towns all the time, so you have to balance that.
You literally cannot do them all at once. And in that regard, this game is a lot more strategy oriented, I think, than other farming games, of just like figuring out who you need to talk to when, what you need to do to accomplish this task or that task when you have a whole plate full of tasks put in front of you, as opposed to like just eating one side dish of food.
Yeah. And I think the other thing as well is that what I found, no, obviously we don't want to get too deep into this, but the other thing that I find really interesting about this one mechanic is that obviously in other farming games there are sometimes characters that come part of the way through. However, nowhere near this level. Like, you know, part of the way through your first year, you're introduced to a whole new town of villagers. And then part of the way through again, you're introduced to a whole nother new set of characters. It's so, like, just the number of characters that are added in after the start is huge.
When I say that is a full cast of characters in each of the 3 towns, that is not an exaggeration. That is literal.
Yeah, like I had basically, before I unlocked the second town, which I've forgotten the name of. Lulucoco. Before I'd unlocked that, I had already decided who my romantic partner was going to be, and then I unlocked Lulucoco, and that all changed. Like, you know, it's
a lot. And like,
yeah,
part of it is also that, like, because there is so many characters, there's also a ton of marriage candidates. I think there's sorry, I was counting. There's literally 13 marriage candidates. That's usually the number of characters in a whole game. Those are just the marriage candidates, and there's more regular NPCs than marriage candidates in each village. Like, it's ridiculous the amount of characters in this game. And that's not even the strong suit of the game, even, in my opinion.
There's a lot to talk about this game.
There's a ton.
We just wanted to give a quick overview in this episode so you can get an idea of whether you want to try it out before our first episode discussing the game properly, which will be in 4 weeks' time.
Mm-hmm. Because our next one's going to be on Factory Town.
As we discussed before, Factory Town.
Yeah.
We like it. Well, we like the look of it.
I will say, really quick bullet points to hit. This game has a lot more complicated and nuanced farming mechanics than, say, Stardew Valley does.
Yeah.
And
it can be quite overwhelming to start with.
Yes. This is a much more mechanically oriented game. So we'll talk about it. That's part of what I like about it. So we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it.
We will.
That's my catchphrase for this podcast, right? We'll talk about it. So look into that. Pick it up if you haven't played it. We'll also be doing a challenge for this game, which we heard some of your feedback. We're refining that process, so it'll hopefully go a bit better this time.
Yep.
Look forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it.
And in the meantime, you can always reach out to us with your questions, comments, concerns, just to say Alola. Hello? Oh my gosh. I have Pokemon on the brain so hard.
The games weren't even about the games based in Alola. Come on.
I love Alola so much. Okay, anyway, you know what else was only 3 years ago? Alola. That came out in November 2016. Oh my gosh. Anyway, time isn't real. Send us your messages. We'll eventually get them depending on how time is working that day. You can email us at the website, harvestseason.club. You can reach out to us on Twitter at THS Pod. You can reach me at Miss Delaney with 2L. Where can they find you, Al?
You can find me at the Scottbot. That's Scott with 1T, also on Twitter.
Yeah. And until next time...
Have a good harvest. Is that what we were saying?
Yes.
Have a good harvest.
Woo, woo, woo.
Yar. No, that's a pirate.
The Harvest Season is created by Raschelle Delaney and Al McKinley. Our art is done by Maker the Brave, and our music is done by Nick Burgess. Feel free to visit our website, harvestseason.club, for show notes, including links to things we discussed and transcripts for every episode. Thanks for listening.
A place I used to live, there was a taco place near us, but the sign had just had like 2 S's at the end.
Oh.
So it wasn't just like tacos. It was
Tacos.
tacos.
Snake tacos.
I don't know. It could have been run by snakes. I don't know. I never went. So
I love how that's your assumption when I say snake tacos is that the taco place is run by snakes, not that the tacos are made of snakes.
I mean,
We think in very different ways.
I literally cannot defend myself.
Anyway, no, I think we need to avoid this conversation anymore.